Everybody sit now, everybody sit now, earth today.
We had a psychology professor that had lived in India and done a lot of missions overseas. And we were actually prepping to do our first feature film, which is called E for Everyone, the Mouse and the Elephant. And we actually, one of the key psychology principles that is often talked about is through Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. And so it's a well-known, well-studied thing. And, so he talks about this pyramid of needs, and at the bottom you have survival and needs, and then it bumps up to the next level that you can achieve is like safety, security, and then you bump up again and it's like belonging and kind of like community, and you keep bumping up to these higher levels, right? Which is kind of sort of like that concept is sort of naturally understood by people. So we took that principle, and the thing that intrigues us most about it is at the top of the pyramid, he actually added the idea of God, transcendence, and he basically said, you have to climb this proverbial ladder to get through all these levels, and then you'll find God. And we took that principle because the psychological principle of it is just so ingrained in society. And we took that into as a scripted element to this documentary. And then we took that out on the road to Kenya, India, Thailand, Malaysia, and all these places, right? And we asked the same 9 questions everywhere we went, like, what do you absolutely need in life? Because like this whole thing is called the pyramid of needs, right? So what do you need? Like, what makes you happy? What's fulfilling for you? Like, where do you find belonging? Like, what's the story of something good that's happened to you? And we kind of had these 9 questions. And then the last question was, do you need God? And the principle of Maslow would have been that in the Western world where people are very past survival, like they're generally speaking, they're past the survival stage. A lot of them are past the safety security stage. A lot of them live in a belonging community stage. Theoretically, they should be the most accessible component of people that would reach God, right? And transcendence, if you will. And it actually was quite the opposite. Like, we would offend people in North America and Europe when we asked if they needed God, or they would just be like so standoffish, like, why would I need God? I have everything I need. And like that was like a recurring answer was like, why would I need God? I have everything, right? And then when we compared that against India, Kenya, Thailand, sort of these more emerging countries, every single time, almost bar none, it was, of course I need God. He's the foundation of everything. So what we actually found in our own research of the Abraham Maslow hierarchy of needs was that the pyramid is actually subverted, that you build off the foundation of God. And then you go, oh, he opens his hand, he satisfies the desires of every living thing. There's your survival, right? Then you go, oh, he's a God of taking care of us so that we have peace and security. There's your security. He's a God that, creates belonging and community. So like those needs are very present, but basically what we determined and what our hypothesis was is that the pyramid is upside down.
I'd like to go further, Daniel. I would like to put a new schema into that and go, what if the virtue ethic, God, is infused in the whole entire structure, like the bonding agent of the concrete?
Mm-hmm. I agree.
It's so infused in the whole thing that from a distance, it doesn't even look like it's there.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Because, okay, like you take those layers, those elements that Maslow, he separated them, and in his mind, they were, God wasn't in the concrete kind of a thing. But how can you have real safety and security apart from what God gives, true safety and security, right? Like in my own view, how can you have true community? And I mean the type of community where like actually everyone loves their neighbor as themselves, like the kind of community where I would give you the shirt off my back. We just had friends in Red Deer where I grew up that tragically lost their house and miraculously got out of the flames, like literally miraculously got out at 11 at night with their kids. and nobody was injured or, inhaled smoke or died in the fire, but the house went up in 2 minutes, right? And literally the response of the community of people that actually like would give them the shirt off their own back, and within 5 hours, I think close to $20,000 on a GoFundMe was given to his family. I mean, like that's community. And it was hundreds of people. What I loved about it was that it wasn't like a grandparent that gave $10,000. It was like hundreds of people that gave $10, $20, $50. Hey, I don't have much right now. Here's $60, And like, that's a community that, in this particular case, I mean, that's God mixed in the concrete, right? Where he's going like, this is actually like sacrificial love right now. And I think that at every level that he is the actual life force and the facet of each of those parts of the hierarchy. Like he's the one behind security, belonging, community, all those things.
And also the network between buildings as well.
Which, like you say, the way that you respond to grief and difficulty can so put you in one of two camps, right? It can so alienate you from certain people because we have these two different worldviews happening, right? We have this worldview where there's ultimately a kingdom of light and there's hope and there's joy and there's these certain fruits that kind of are associated with that kingdom. And then we have this other alternate worldview where it's like a kingdom of darkness. And literally, even if the light were on, all you see is darkness, like it's not being able to see how the concrete has God and its actual, like the glue of the concrete is actually held together by God. It's like, there's a view that does not see that no matter what happens. And then there's a view that sees that no matter what happens. And those are such alienating viewpoints, aren't they? Because if you take heavy difficulty and the burden like you've laid out here, and you choose a path towards joy and purpose, you're going to be thrown to the wolves by some people, right? Because some people can't handle the fact that you can get over grief, But like, I like the scripture that says there's a time to weep and there's a time for joy. Like there's a time for mourning and hurt, and there's a time to be filled with life and joy. And it doesn't mean that, so it doesn't take away your ability to grieve and to go through that season, but it gives you freedom to move on, right? And what does it happen? Like, what happens to a person if they stay stuck in the burden? I mean, the things that come to mind for me is like, you go on a path to bitterness, you go on a path to brokenness, you go through all of the things in this world that actually don't do anything good for you, and everybody knows it, right? Like you get attached to drugs and alcohol and all of these different vices that people can choose. And we tend to all choose maybe a different vice depending on what we're going through. But so there's that sounds a lot like the path to darkness, right? And there's like the other kingdom, the other choice, and it's so much more life-giving, right? Because from that place, you can pull people out of the darkness.
Maybe when you're going into a village in Tanzania, let's say, how do you approach that situation though? Because they struggle every day. Are you able to just bring joy or see joy? And is that received?
I think it's exactly like you say, is without the dichotomy, you don't know how good the alternative is, right? If you don't have a taste of grief and loss, even if like as a kid, the first time you see it is maybe it's some distant relative or a friend's relative that passes away, and all of a sudden you have this arrow of grief, right? Like when it mourns my heart to think of the moments that my own kids will go through when they experience those blows and those hurts. However, because they'll go through certain things, and because I know that journey from being even from a kid, like I remember some of the first times as a young person, probably like, maybe 7, 8, 9, however many years old are these memories. Like when I was 7 or 8 or 9 years old, where I learned that the world was a place filled with pain, like where you learn that there's these horrible things that happen in the world. Or like, I remember as a kid, the news is on and you hear about some kid that gets kidnapped, right? And all of a sudden this dagger goes into your soul because you have this understanding for the first time, the world is not what you thought it was, right? Like even continuing that all the way on until now, making films about issues like human trafficking. Like the world has darkness that is darker than we ever imagined. And that we wish we could unknow, You know what I mean? But the fact that we know it gives us a way clearer picture of what life looks like. And so when we go to Tanzania, you know, these people have seen it. They've lost direct relatives, maybe a mother, a father, a brother, a sibling to AIDS. Maybe they've lost 2 or 3 relatives to malaria. They've had to take their young sister out of school because someone's basically got to take care of the parents and run the farm. You know what I mean? Like, they know grief, but because they've had such a piercing of that grief, when they experience joy, they experience it like no. Like when I'll never forget, we had a reverend, his name is William, from Kenya, and he said something that I still think about to this day when we went to a church service out in the desert in northern Kenya. And he said, one thing you have to know about these people, he said, they worship with all their hearts. And when you saw that, I mean, I get goosebumps today when I think about it, because it's like they had so much loss and pain, but they believe God with all their heart, you know, like they are just filled with life. And that ends up touching us and our teams way more than even what we think to bring there. And that's the beauty of the reason why we travel and do missions in these places, is we have something to bring, but they have something incredible to give us. And it's always a direct exchange, right? It's like we're sharing life. It's not about bringing, you know, money and nets and all these things, even though it is about that. It's like there's this incredible exchange at the human relationship level, and it has so much to do with that dichotomy of joy and grief.
I'm going to add to my list, life is a valuable commodity that is to be shared and to be exchanged.
It's interesting, you know, the saying was seeing is believing, right? But that's not what faith says, right? Faith says believing is seeing. So it's actually, again, you've got your light and darkness picture right there. Like, we have these worldly slogans and sayings like seeing is believing, but you've actually, if you can believe it, then you'll see it, right? So it's turning it on its head again, just like the pyramid was upside down. It's like so many of our worldly slogans and scenarios are completely backwards, because we're actually asked by God. He actually tells us in the Bible that the one currency that we really have is faith. It says, without faith, it is impossible to please him. And so it's actually believing that is seeing, because if you can believe it, you actually will see it, but you also are then connecting with the heart of God, because faith is what pleases him, right? And the reason that I think it's that way, and a lot of people wrestle and struggle with that, it's kind of like it puts you in those two camps again, just like the choosing joy in the midst of grief, right? But choosing to believe when you don't see, that absolutely puts you into a different camp of some people, because they actually think you're crazy. And I think that's the beauty of faith as your eyes to see, right? Is it looks crazy because in the reality of what you're visually seeing, it is crazy, right? It's like, okay, is this guy like totally loopy? He keeps saying that this thing is happening and we don't see it, right?
How do you access the infinite mindset when you live in such a finite world? That's the question.
This is the ultimate question. I think it's such a perfect nutshell view of kind of what we've been talking about, because if God is really in the concrete, and the concrete is the structure of all life, then at every and any point of our journey through life, we can access the infinite. Because I think that's the basic. I like how you've labeled these different things, because it comes down to a lot of things really are black and white. Because if you separate it into infinite and finite, there's so many people, and probably every person almost ever could relate at some point to the finite, right? But then we have those moments where we go out on a starry night and we see the infinite and we go, wow, like all of a sudden I know there's more than just the finite world that I've been looking at all day on my laptop, you know? And I've been chipping away at whatever and working remotely, and it's just like life is so finite. But then all of a sudden you breathe the fresh air and you look at the stars, and Venus is brighter than it's ever been, and it's just like this infinite world opens up, right? Or you stand under the pressure of a waterfall and it just pummels you and you go, wow, there's like infinite power here. There's more than what I thought there was in that trickling stream, you know? Like, so there's those moments in life where nature shows us it's infinite, right? And it's like, and that's even still nature. Like the Bible says that even the sky and the earth are going to flee from God's presence. So you think that nature's big? You think that 100 trillion galaxies is big? Like I've just been reading about what the Hubble telescope has captured and how they pointed into a dark, finite portion of space, right? And within a finite, tiny spectacle view into space, they saw infinite galaxies, like galaxies innumerable. And inside every galaxy is 100 billion stars. And so they thought, oh, there's hundreds of billions of galaxies, which is like an unimaginable, seemingly infinite number. And yet they were off by a factor of hundreds. Like they believe that there's more than 2 trillion galaxies, and that within those galaxies, there's more stars in the universe than on the sand, than as specks of sand on the ocean beaches on the earth, right? So like that's an infinite view, but even what we would say that's infinite, that is going to flee from God's presence. That is actually nothing compared to his infinite nature. And I mean, just think about like, let there be light, right? And God says it and it continues to make the universe expand eternally because he said it and it keeps going, right? The universe is ever expanding. More galaxies are being revealed, right? More stars are being revealed as it continues to expand. And this is because he's infinite. So he is in that infinite God is in the finite details of life.
Yes. Now turn that lens from the sky to a microscope and see your life in struggle and see the galaxies of infinite possibilities within you.
Yeah, it so depends what you look at and how you look at it, right? Like earlier in our conversation, I was thinking like there's this amazing story and, you know, take it as a historical fact or take it as a story. But I mean, it is a historical fact in the timeline of humanity. But there's this guy named Jacob, right? And he's out in the desert and he thinks he's all alone, right? How many of us can relate? We think we're all alone at times, right? In life. Some people never think anyone's around. Like they always feel alone, right? And so there's this story where he's sleeping with his head on a rock in the desert and he's like, I'm abandoned, I'm alone, right? Well, newsflash, there'd been a promise from God from before he was even born that he had a future, right? Well, he has this dream when he falls asleep in the desert that there's angels ascending and descending on this ladder between heaven and earth, right? And he wakes up and he names that place and he says, God, you were there and I didn't even know it, right? So he discovered what was in the concrete, right? All of a sudden he has this mind-blowing dream revelation from God that even when he thought there was nothing, there was these like infinite angels, you know, just like boom, 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 going up and down between earth and heaven, taking things from God down to earth, right? Taking things from earth up to heaven, like this amazing picture. And he realizes from then on, like God is always with me. He's always here.
Yeah. And if only we could remember that we've had those moments, if that's the apocalyptic unveiling, right? If you've gone through one of those unveilings, the thing is, Jacob in that story forgets his cosmic significance at times. You know what I mean? Even with that great unveiling in truth, you wake up tomorrow, reset, and you go, oh, I wonder where God is. Is my life even important? Is God in my life? All these different questions come back again. It's maddening because it's cyclical. You know, you come back to these moments again with even more understanding, hopefully.
And how encouraging that the great leaders of the past forgot that he was in the concrete too. You know what I mean? Like if we can take that perspective of like the biggest hero in your life felt like it was the end of everything at some point. The people that you were like, wow, this person has it together. They were on their knees crying in the middle of the night, right? Like you have to see it from the perspective of like, we're in a shared journey and struggle. And ultimately that's why each one of us then has the free will choice, right? Of what camp are we going to camp out in? Because you still have a choice of where you spend most of your time, right?
Well, this is the thing. Like a lot of people spend their time, I find, is in time is money, let's say, right? Time is finite. Valuable resources are finite. Living conditions are finite. That is actually a, spoiler alert, finite worldview. That until you're given the option or the tools, you're going to live there. Or you're going to be born in a world there. And I think left to our own devices, that's where we go. We're human beings with finite bodies. We only do have so much time. It is a valuable resource. All these things are very true, right? But what if you lived in a car that had unlimited energy supply? What if you were able to tap into the subterranean spring of love and joy, where the waters just come out, What if you're able to reach to the tree of life, and be able to seize for once and know and receive the fruit of the Spirit in a way that you could give to others and share that experience? And I think that's how you break free of it, is all of a sudden when you put that little bit of concrete in your life and it bonds communities together, like you're mentioning. I think we're getting pretty close to finding the source of this and why it's important.
Absolutely. And the reason that I have a big smile on my face is that this is the mind-blowing truth and the ultimate theme and message of the entire Bible, and why literally billions of people follow it, is because the infinite became finite. Like God. So God, if you want to boil it all down to like, what is the message of the Bible? It's that the infinite became finite so that we could become infinite. It's that God became flesh so that he could become finite and live perfectly and show that the infinite and finite are bonded, right? By putting God inside a finite body of flesh and having him not transgress any of the things that were ever called for him to do, never sin, never fall short, but become a perfect sacrifice for all of humanity so that bang, we can have infinite nature. We can have a new nature and a new creation life. I mean, it's like totally mind-blowing, right? Like the infinite and finite are actually married through the life of Jesus. And he allows us to become a part of that concrete where the infinite is in everything.
If you ever spend time in George Lakoff or Mark Johnson and his metaphors we live by, it's a field of cognition research, philosophy and psychology that states that we embody the world around us. And there are these things called links, ideas that link together. When one pulls, the other one's affected, or vice versa. And what we're communicating here, there's a link between realms, or you know what I mean? And that link is Jesus.
Absolutely. And strangely, and I was reflecting on this recently, I'm sure we're going to wrap up, but a big thing is that when you need something most is often when it's hardest to see that you need it, right? Like, I know that our recent film called Dream, which is about dreaming for your future, right? And creating a plan of purpose with God, it's more prevalently needed now than ever in a lot of people's lives. But they'd be the most apt in many cases to turn away from it because of the immediate necessities of life that seem before them, And it's so, how often in our lives, I'm speaking to myself here, do we not actually choose the one thing that we need most, which is that joy, that hope, that faith, that love, where it is right before us, but there's also 47 other things going like this in front of our face, right? So how often do we choose those distractions, even though deep down we know that love is right there? Deep down we know that there's hope there. Deep down we know there's a person we could reach out to. There's a phone a friend. There's like that thing that we could go grasp onto. But there's all this, right? So we choose 47 distractions first in many, many cases. And I just think like we need to prod ourselves, remind ourselves, man, when I'm feeling low, when I'm feeling hit heavy, when I'm feeling all of those temptations, when I'm feeling all the things that could pull me to that other kingdom, that's when I have to create a way to jump to the love, jump to the hope, jump to the faith. You know, I have to choose joy even though I feel sorrow. Like I'll never forget a brother-in-law playing music at, you know, a tragic funeral. And he's just like, you know what? I do not want to sing right now, but that's why I know I have to, you know? And you're just like, oh, yes, I know exactly what you're saying, because it's the most illogical seemingly thing to do, right? And therefore, when you go there, so much lifts off of you, right? You're just like, wow, I needed that, you know? I just was told by a friend that went on one of our Tanzania trips, he's like, and he didn't use these words, but I'll use the analogy because we've referred to it. He's like, I found God in the concrete because I saw joy in a place of grief. And what he was talking about in the actual story was like seeing kids that had suffered so much in this small village, but they had immense joy when it came to celebrating something in life. And it just pierced his own heart, right? He's like, I saw in the face of that kid that God is in everything, right? And I mean, those are the moments, right? That's kind of the why we do what we do moment, right? Like, oh, I know why I went through all the strain and struggle and planning and effort and money and fundraising and all the different pieces, whatever your life looks like, right? Then you have that moment. That's the eureka moment. And you're like, yes, God is in the concrete.
Yeah. And to anyone listening too, is your life is important and that you're worth taking up space in the universe. Because if you and I both know that there's times in our story where we feel like we're not worth taking up space in the universe, and that we feel like our lives are falling apart, but really that concrete's there, and just allow it to really settle in. Because I think that's why patience is such an important thing in struggle, because you have 47 other choices that could tear the whole thing apart if you just need just times. There's a time to be patient and there's a time to be persistent, but right now I believe it's time to really let that settle in.
Absolutely, because everything that you bring to community, to the table, to life, to the arts, to a morning sitting down and having a cup of coffee together, everything that you bring to the practical and the big parts of life, you know, however we perceive that, it's a piercing grief if you're not part of it. If you are taken out of the picture, Des, then there's a world of grief that surrounds that. That's how you know that your life, it matters, right? Is that there is a world of grief, but if you're there, there's the potential for a world of joy, right? Like you take me out of the picture of my family and my life, and it's like there is a world of grief that would surround that. But if I'm in the picture, there could be grief, but there's the opportunity to choose joy, right? There's the opportunity for incredible, wonderful things to happen, mixed in with lots of other normal life things, right? And like, so everybody listening, watching, I mean, like you said, it's immensely valuable that you take up space in this universe. Like it is immense value that you're part of that picture.
Wow, what a great way to send it off. I hope that this reaches somebody who needed to hear it at the right time.
Too.
And to anybody who wants to hear more, feel free to find Earth to Des online and find Daniel's beautiful work on Unveil Studios. Google that, and there's obviously many resources from all over you can find. Google's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Okay, great. And till next time, everybody. Thank you.
We can talk about love.